Laura Bennett sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The parking lot of the airport was nearly empty at this early hour, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching her. She glanced over her shoulder one last time before grabbing her small suitcase from the passenger seat and stepping out into the chilly morning air. It had taken months to plan this escape. Months of sneaking money away whenever Richard wasn't looking, carefully packing a few essentials without raising suspicion, and waiting for the perfect moment to leave. Her husband, Richard, had always been controlling, dictating where she went, who she talked to, even what clothes she wore. But lately, things had gotten worse. His temper flared more often. His words cut deeper, and Laura knew she couldn't stay any longer. The thought of leaving him behind gave her some comfort, but it also filled her with fear. What if he found her? What if he came after her? Shaking off the doubts, she reminded herself why she was doing this. Freedom. A chance to start over. Her sister lived in Seattle, far enough away that maybe, just maybe, Richard wouldn't think to look there. That was the plan anyway. Inside the terminal, Laura kept her head down as she approached the ticket counter. She already had her boarding pass printed. It was part of her strategy to avoid drawing attention to herself. The agent scanned her ticket and handed it back with a polite smile. "Gate 17, he said. "Your flight is boarding now." Laura nodded quickly and hurried toward security. Every step felt like walking on thin ice. She half expected Richard to burst through the doors at any moment, shouting her name. But no one came. She made it through the checkpoint without incident and followed the signs to Gate 17. When she arrived, the gate area was nearly deserted. Most of the passengers were already on board, and the flight attendants were preparing to close the doors. Laura rushed forward, clutching her ticket and ID. One of the attendants waved her through, and she stepped onto the jet bridge, exhaling deeply as the door clicked shut behind her. The plane was small, much smaller than she'd expected. There were only about 20 rows, each with 2 seats on either side of the aisle. Laura scanned the cabin until she found her assigned seat, near the middle of the plane. As she settled in, she noticed something strange. The interior looked different from any commercial airliner she'd ever been on. The seats were sleek and minimalist, made of smooth black material that seemed almost futuristic. Even the lighting was unusual, casting a soft blue glow throughout the cabin. She shook her head slightly, trying to dismiss the oddness. Maybe this was just a newer model of aircraft, she told herself. Or perhaps she was too tired to notice details properly. Whatever it was, she didn't have time to dwell on it. She needed to focus on getting to Seattle. As she stowed her bag, under the seat in front of her, she became aware of movement beside her. A man slid into the adjacent seat, nodding politely as their eyes met. He looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, with dark hair neatly combed and sharp features softened by a warm smile. His piercing blue eyes caught her attention, immediately, though they held an air of mystery. "Hi," he said quietly, extending a hand. "I'm Ethan Cole." Laura hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. "Laura Bennett," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. Normally, she would have tried to make small talk, but today, she wanted nothing more than to keep to herself. Ethan didn't seem deterred by her reserved demeanor. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, studying her curiously. "First time flying?" he asked. "No," Laura answered shortly. She didn't want to encourage conversation, but something about Ethan's calm presence made her feel uneasy. It wasn't threatening, just unsettling. He chuckled lightly, as if sensing her discomfort. "Don't worry, I'm not usually this chatty either. Just figured we're stuck together for the next few hours, so we might as well introduce ourselves." Laura forced a small smile, hoping it would discourage further questions. But Ethan wasn't easily dissuaded. After a brief pause, he continued, "Where are you headed?" "Seattle," she said automatically, then regretted giving even that much information. She glanced at him warily, wondering if he recognized her reluctance to engage. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Seattle? Really? Huh." He tilted his head toward the screen embedded in the seatback in front of them. Because according to this, we're not going to Seattle. Laura froze. Her heart skipped a beat as she leaned forward to get a better look at the screen. Sure enough, instead of displaying a route map to Seattle, it showed coordinates and symbols she didn't understand. Beneath them, in bold letters, was written, "Destination unknown." "What does that mean?" she whispered, panic rising in her chest. "This can't be right," Ethan shrugged, though his expression remained calm. "Looks like we're not taking the usual route." Laura's mind raced. How could this happen? Had she accidentally boarded the wrong plane? No, that didn't make sense. She double-checked her ticket, her gate number, everything. This was supposed to be her flight to Seattle. So why did the screen say otherwise? Before she could ask another question, the plane began moving. The engines roared to life, and the familiar sensation of acceleration pressed her back against her seat. Outside the window, the ground rolled by faster and faster until they lifted off the runway entirely. Laura stared out the window, watching the city shrink beneath them. Something about the sky felt different, too bright, too vivid. The clouds shimmered unnaturally, as if lit from within. "This isn't normal," she murmured, turning to Ethan. "Something's wrong." For the first time since meeting him, Ethan's expression shifted. The casual charm faded, replaced by a seriousness that sent a chill down Laura's spine. "You're right," he admitted. "Something is very wrong. But don't worry. I'll explain everything once we're airborne." His words should have reassured her, but they only deepened her unease. Explain what? What kind of explanation could possibly justify what was happening? Laura gripped the armrests tightly, her pulse pounding in her ears. Whatever this journey entailed, one thing was certain. It wasn't going to end in Seattle. The plane climbed higher. The world outside the window transformed. The clouds parted to reveal not open sky, but a vast expanse of swirling colors, pinks, purples, and golds blending together in a cosmic dance. Stars twinkled faintly in the distance, impossibly close. Laura gasped, unable to tear her gaze away from the surreal sight. Beside her, Ethan watched silently, his earlier calm now tinged with something akin to awe. "Welcome to the unknown," he said softly, almost to himself. Laura turned to him, her voice trembling. "What is this place? Where are we going?" Ethan met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "I told you. I'll explain soon. But first, tell me this. Why were you running?" The question caught her off guard. Running. Did he know about Richard? About the abuse, the control, the suffocating grip of her marriage? She opened her mouth to deny it, to deflect. But the words caught in her throat. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as Richard's wife, not as someone else's property, but as herself. She started, then stopped, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, she settled on the truth. "I was trying to leave. My husband. Start over somewhere safe." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he'd suspected as much. "Good," he said simply. "That's good." Before Laura could press him for answers, the plane jolted suddenly, throwing her back against her seat. The lights flickered, and a low hum filled the cabin. Outside the windows, the colorful void twisted violently, pulling them deeper into its embrace. Laura clutched the armrests again, her breath coming in short bursts. "We're entering the corridor," Ethan explained, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Just hold on." Hold on to what? Laura wondered desperately. To the seat? To sanity? To hope? She closed her eyes, bracing herself for whatever lay ahead. And somewhere, in the back of her mind, a single thought echoed, "I've left Earth behind." The turbulence grew worse. Laura clutched the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The plane shuddered violently, and the lights dimmed until the cabin was bathed in an eerie darkness. Outside, the windows, the swirling colors of the cosmic void twisted faster, almost as if they were being pulled into some unseen vortex. She felt her stomach drop as the plane seemed to tilt sideways, and for a moment she thought they might crash. Ethan remained calm, his hands resting lightly on his knees. He didn't look frightened, just focused. When he noticed Laura's panic, he reached out and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said, his voice steady. "This part is always rough." Laura wanted to scream at him. How could he act so calm when everything around them felt like it was falling apart? But before she could say anything, the shaking stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The plane leveled out, and the lights flickered back on, casting a soft glow over the cabin. Outside the windows, the view was breathtaking and completely impossible. Instead of open sky or clouds, they were flying through what looked like another world entirely. A sprawling city floated in the distance, suspended amidst shimmering nebulae that glowed with hues of gold, purple, and blue. Towering structures made of glass and metal spiraled upward, their surfaces reflecting the light of nearby stars. Between the buildings, streams of glowing particles flowed like rivers, connecting one structure to another. It was beautiful, but also terrifying. Laura stared, unable to believe what she was seeing. What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Where are we?" Ethan leaned forward slightly, glancing out the window before turning back to her. "We're not on Earth anymore," he said matter-of-factly. "Welcome to the Astral Accord's transport network." "The Astral Accord?" Laura repeated, her mind struggling to process the words. "What are you talking about? What is that?" "It's a secret organization," Ethan explained, keeping his voice low. "They operate outside of Earth's governments, ferrying people to distant colonies and settlements across the galaxy. This plane, it's not really a plane. It's a specialized vessel designed for interstellar travel." Laura shook her head, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "That's insane," she muttered. "There's no way this is real. I must be dreaming or hallucinating." "It's real," Ethan insisted gently. "And you're here because the Accord chose you." "Chose me?" Laura echoed, her voice rising slightly. "I didn't choose anything. I just wanted to get to Seattle." "I know," Ethan said, holding up a hand to calm her. "Mistakes rarely happen, but when they do, there's usually a reason. If you're here, it means the Accord saw something special in you, something that makes you valuable to them." "Valuable?" Laura snapped, anger bubbling beneath her fear. "I'm nobody. Just a woman trying to escape a bad marriage. There's nothing special about me." Ethan studied her, for a moment his piercing blue eyes searching hers. "You'd be surprised," he said quietly. "Sometimes the people who think they're ordinary turn out to be extraordinary under the right circumstances." Laura didn't know how to respond. Her mind was spinning too fast to focus on anything. She glanced around the cabin, noticing that the other passengers seemed completely unfazed by the surreal landscape outside. Some were reading, others chatting quietly, and a few appeared to be sleeping. How could they act so normal after witnessing something like this? "They all know where we're going," Ethan said, following her gaze. "Most of them are regular travelers, people who've been recruited by the Accord or who voluntarily signed up to start new lives elsewhere. They're used to this kind of thing." "And me?" Laura asked bitterly. "Am I supposed to just accept that my life has been hijacked by some mysterious space organization?" Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "I won't lie to you, it's overwhelming at first, but trust me, the Accord doesn't take people without a purpose. You'll have a chance to decide your future once we land. Until then, try to stay calm." "Calm?" Laura shot back, incredulous. "How am I supposed to stay calm when I don't even know where I am or why I'm here?" Before Ethan could answer, the intercom crackled to life. A smooth, neutral voice filled the cabin. "Attention, passengers. We will be arriving at Nova Haven shortly. Please prepare for descent." Nova Haven. The name sent a chill down Laura's spine. Was that their destination? Another planet? Another colony? She turned to Ethan, desperate for answers. "What's Nova Haven?" she demanded. "It's one of the Accord's largest colonies," Ethan replied. "A settlement built on a habitable moon orbiting a gas giant. It's still growing, but it's already home to thousands of people. Scientists, engineers, farmers, artists, you name it. Everyone there is working together to build something new. Laura frowned. So, what happens when we get there? I just stuck? You'll have options, Ethan assured her. The Accord provides resources and support for newcomers. You can choose to stay and start fresh, or, if you really want to, you can petition to return to Earth. It's not easy, but it's possible. Laura wasn't convinced. Returning to Earth meant facing Richard again, and that was a risk she wasn't sure she was willing to take. But staying here, in this strange alien place, felt equally daunting. She slumped back in her seat, overwhelmed by the weight of her situation. As the ship began its descent, the view outside changed once more. The floating city disappeared behind them, replaced by a rugged landscape dotted with mountains and forests. Streams of glowing water wound their way through valleys, and patches of vegetation shimmered faintly as if infused with starlight. In the distance, Laura could see clusters of buildings, some modern and sleek, others rustic and earthy. It was clear that humanity had left its mark here, but nature still dominated the scenery. When the ship finally touched down, Laura felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that the turbulent journey was over, and dread at what awaited her next. The doors hissed open and cool air rushed into the cabin, carrying with it the scent of pine and something metallic. Passengers began filing out, chatting animatedly as they stepped onto the platform. Ethan stood and gestured for Laura to follow him. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you settled." She hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. So far, he'd been honest, though not necessarily comforting. Still, he seemed to know more than anyone else on board, and she didn't have many other options. With a deep breath, she grabbed her bag and followed him off the ship. The platform led to a large, hangar-like structure bustling with activity. People moved quickly, loading crates onto hovercrafts and unloading supplies from other ships. Above them, massive screens displayed information in languages Laura didn't recognize. Despite the chaos, there was an underlying order to it all, a sense that everyone knew exactly what they were doing. Ethan guided her through the crowd, weaving between workers and travelers alike. Eventually, they reached a quieter area near the edge of the hangar, where a group of officials stood waiting. One of them, a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp features, approached them. "Ethan Cole," the woman said, nodding in greeting. "Good to see you again." "Commander Hayes," Ethan replied, returning the nod. "This is Laura Bennett. She's..." Unexpected. Hayes turned her attention to Laura, studying her with piercing eyes. "Ms. Bennett," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Welcome to Nova Haven. I understand this may come as a shock, but rest assured, you are safe here. We'll provide you with temporary housing and assistance while you adjust." Laura nodded numbly, unsure what to say. Safe? Could she really believe that? Everything about this place felt foreign, unpredictable. Yet despite her fears, she couldn't deny the spark of curiosity growing inside her. What would it be like to live somewhere completely new? Somewhere Richard could never find her. As Hayes handed her a tablet containing basic instructions and maps of the colony, Laura glanced at Ethan. He gave her a small, encouraging smile. "Take it one step at a time," he said softly. "You'll figure things out." For the first time since boarding the wrong plane, Laura allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this strange turn of events might lead to something better. But as she followed Hayes toward the exit, she couldn't shake the feeling that her journey was far from over. Laura stepped outside the hangar, her eyes widening as she took in the full scope of Nova Haven. The colony stretched out before her, a blend of futuristic technology and untamed wilderness. Towering buildings made of glass and metal stood alongside, clusters of smaller earthy structures built from natural materials like wood and stone. Streams of glowing water flowed between them, their light reflecting off the surfaces of nearby trees. Above, the sky shimmered with hues of gold and violet, dotted with unfamiliar constellations. Despite the beauty, Laura felt a pang of unease. This place was nothing like Earth, and the thought of staying here, starting over in such an alien environment, was overwhelming. She clutched the tablet Commander Hayes had given her, trying to focus on the maps and instructions displayed on its screen. But her mind kept drifting back to Richard, wondering if he'd somehow find her even here. Ethan walked beside her, his presence both comforting and frustrating. On one hand, he seemed genuinely concerned about her well-being. On the other, he still hadn't answered all her questions. "So," she said finally, breaking the silence. "What exactly do you do for the Accord?" Ethan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "I'm what you might call a guide," he replied. "I help newcomers adjust to life on colonies. Like this one. Sometimes I also assist with missions or transport runs." "Missions?" Laura asked, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of missions?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Let's just say not everything in space is friendly. There are challenges, political tensions, rogue factions, that sort of thing. The Accord works to keep things stable." Laura frowned. "Rogue factions? You mean there are dangerous people out here too?" "Not everyone agrees with how the Accord operates," Ethan admitted. "Some groups think they're too controlling, while others want to exploit resources for themselves. It's complicated." Great, Laura thought bitterly. Just when she thought she'd escaped one toxic situation, another loomed ahead. She didn't respond, instead focusing on putting one foot in front of the other as they followed Hayes toward temporary housing. Their destination turned out to be a small cluster of prefabricated units nestled near the edge of the settlement. The accommodations were simple but functional: a bed, a desk, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom. Laura set her bag down on the bed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. At least she had a place to stay, even if it wasn't permanent. Hayes lingered in the doorway, watching her carefully. "You'll meet your orientation counselor tomorrow," she said. "They'll help you decide your next steps. Until then, rest. Adjusting takes time." With that, Hayes left, leaving Laura alone with Ethan. He lingered awkwardly by the door, clearly unsure whether to stay or go. Finally, he spoke. "If you need anything, let me know. I'll check in later." Laura nodded absently, too tired to argue or thank him. Once he was gone, she collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling. Her thoughts raced. How could she possibly adapt to this? What skills did she have that would matter in a place like this? And most importantly, how long until Richard found her? Sleep came fitfully, plagued by dreams of Richard's angry face and the swirling cosmic void outside the plane window. When morning arrived, Laura dragged herself out of bed, determined to face whatever lay ahead. Her orientation counselor turned out to be a cheerful woman named Mia, who greeted her warmly and led her through a series of assessments designed to identify her strengths and interests. By the end of the session, Mia suggested roles ranging from agricultural work to administrative tasks, none of which appealed to Laura. She knew she needed to choose something, though, so she settled on helping organize supplies, an option that sounded relatively low stress. Over the following days, Laura began settling into a routine. She attended workshops to learn more about the colony's systems, explored the surrounding area during breaks, and slowly started meeting other residents. Some were friendly, eager to share stories about their lives before arriving on Nova Haven. Others were distant, focused solely on their work. Everyone seemed to carry their own burdens, just like her. During this time, Ethan continued to check in regularly, often stopping by after his shifts to see how she was doing. Their conversations grew less formal, and Laura found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about Richard, the control, the fear, the constant walking on eggshells, and how desperate she'd been to escape. To her surprise, Ethan listened without judgment, offering quiet support rather than pity. One evening, as they sat together on a hill overlooking the colony, Ethan broke the comfortable silence between them. "You're stronger than you realize, Laura," he said softly. "Leaving someone like Richard, it takes courage." She looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel lost." "That's okay," Ethan replied. "Being lost gives you a chance to find yourself again." His words stayed with her long after he left. planting a seed of hope in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, this strange new world could offer her a fresh start. But peace rarely lasts forever. A few nights later, Laura woke suddenly to the sound of voices outside her unit. Peering through the window, she saw two figures arguing in hushed tones, one of whom was Ethan. Curiosity got the better of her, and she slipped outside, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. "They know," Ethan whispered urgently into a communicator device. "About the cargo, and about her. We need to move quickly." "Cargo? Her?" Laura's stomach churned as she strained to hear more. "Commander Hayes is already on alert," the voice on the other end replied. "Keep her close, but don't let her suspect anything. If Richard finds out she's here..." The mention of Richard's name sent a jolt of fear through Laura. She stepped back instinctively, accidentally knocking over a potted plant. The noise drew immediate attention, and Ethan spun around, spotting her instantly. "Laura!" he called, his voice tense. "What are you doing out here?" She stared at him, betrayal burning in her chest. "Who were you talking to?" she demanded. "And why did you mention Richard?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," she snapped, her voice rising. "Because right now it sounds like you've been lying to me this whole time." For a moment, Ethan looked torn. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There's more going on than I told you," he admitted. "Richard isn't just abusive. He has connections to rogue factions within the Accord. Somehow he found out you were taken aboard the transport vessel. Now those factions are using you as leverage against us." Laura's knees nearly buckled under the weight of his words. "So what does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That I'm stuck here because of him?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "It means we need to protect you, and it means you deserve to know the truth, even if it's messy." Though, his honesty softened her anger slightly. Laura couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. For days she avoided him, throwing herself into her work and trying to ignore the nagging doubts in her mind. Was Ethan truly trustworthy, or was he just another person manipulating her for their own gain? As the days passed, however, Laura realized something important. She couldn't run anymore. Whether she liked it or not, her fate was tied to this place, and to Ethan. If Richard really was involved, then hiding wouldn't solve anything. She needed to fight back. When Ethan approached her again, she met his gaze steadily. "Tell me everything," she said. "No more secrets." He nodded, understanding the gravity of her demand. Together they began unraveling the tangled web of lies, danger, and opportunity that surrounded them. For the first time since arriving on Nova Haven, Laura felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, and she wouldn't let anyone, not Richard, not the Accord, not even Ethan, stand in her way. Laura and Ethan spent the next few days piecing together the truth about Richard's involvement with the rogue factions. It wasn't easy. Ethan had to dig through encrypted files and contacts within the Accord, while Laura tried to make sense of the fragments he shared with her. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Richard wasn't just a controlling husband. He was dangerous. His connections ran deep, and his reach extended far beyond Earth. Ethan explained that Richard had been working with a group called the Eclipse Syndicate, a faction known for smuggling illegal goods and exploiting colonies like Nova Haven. They specialized in using people as leverage, hostages, informants, or bargaining chips. Somehow they'd learned about Laura's transport aboard the vessel, and now they were pressuring the Accord to hand her over. "What do they want with me?" Laura asked one evening as they sat in her unit poring over notes on Ethan's tablet. "I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," Ethan replied firmly. "You're someone Richard cares about, or at least someone he can use to manipulate others. If they get their hands on you, they'll use you against him, or worse." Laura shuddered at the thought. She didn't want to imagine what worse might mean, but despite her fear, she couldn't ignore the growing determination inside her. Running from Richard hadn't worked on Earth, and hiding from him here wouldn't work either. Sooner or later, she'd have to confront this head-on. Tell me what we need to do, she said finally, meeting Ethan's gaze. If they're coming for me, I won't let them win without a fight. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. We'll stop them before they even get close, he promised. But it won't be easy. We'll need proof of their plans, and help from people we trust. That night, they devised a risky plan. Using Ethan's knowledge of the colony's systems, they would infiltrate a hidden base deep in Nova Haven's forests, where the Eclipse Syndicate operated. It was dangerous territory, guarded by members loyal to the rogue faction. If caught, they risked exposure, not just to the Syndicate but also to the Accord, which frowned upon unauthorized interference. Over the next week, Laura trained under Ethan's guidance. He taught her basic self-defense, how to move quietly through the wilderness and how to disable security systems. Though she struggled at first, her resolve grew stronger with each session. She practiced late into the nights, fueled by anger and fear, until she felt confident enough to hold her own. Finally, the day arrived. Armed with makeshift tools and a small communicator device, Laura and Ethan set out before dawn, heading toward the forest edge. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the sounds of the colony faded behind them, replaced by the rustling of leaves and distant calls of unfamiliar wildlife. After hours of hiking, they reached the base, a cluster of camouflage structures surrounded by thick vegetation. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons glinting faintly in the dim light. Laura's heart pounded as she crouched beside Ethan behind a fallen tree, watching their movements carefully. "This is it," Ethan whispered. "Stay low and follow my lead." They waited for the right moment, timing their approach between guard rotations. When the coast was clear, they darted forward, slipping past the outer defenses. Inside the compound, they moved quickly, avoiding cameras and scanning rooms for evidence. Laura's hands trembled as she rifled through documents and data pads, searching for anything that could expose the Syndicate's plans. In one room, they struck gold, a terminal displaying communications logs detailing the Syndicate's operations. Ethan plugged in a data drive, copying the files onto it, but as he worked, an alarm blared suddenly, echoing through the building. "They know we're here," Laura hissed, panic rising in her chest. "Keep moving," Ethan urged, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the exit. They sprinted down corridors, dodging guards who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Shots rang out, narrowly missing them as they dashed into the forest. The chase was chaotic. Trees blurred past as they ran, branches whipping at their faces. Laura's lungs burned, but she pushed herself harder, knowing that stopping meant capture. Behind them, shouts and footsteps grew louder. "We're almost there," Ethan called out, pointing ahead to a rocky outcrop where they'd stashed their escape route, a small hovercraft hidden beneath a tarp. They scrambled aboard, and Ethan fired up the engine just as the first wave of pursuers emerged from the trees. Bullets ricocheted off the craft's hull as Ethan maneuvered it into the air, weaving between trees to avoid fire. Laura clung to the seat, her knuckles white as she stared back at the shrinking figures below. For a moment she thought they might actually make it, but then the craft shuddered violently, struck by a lucky shot. "We're hit," Ethan shouted, fighting to keep control. Smoke filled the cabin as alarms blared, warning of critical damage. "Hold on!" With a final burst of speed, they cleared the forest canopy and descended rapidly toward a nearby river. The impact sent shockwaves through the craft, throwing both of them forward. Laura hit her head on the dashboard, stars exploding in her vision. Darkness threatened to swallow her whole, but she fought to stay conscious. When she opened her eyes again, Ethan was kneeling beside her, his face etched with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked urgently. "I think so," Laura managed, wincing as she touched the tender spot on her forehead. Around them, the wreckage of the hovercraft smoldered, its remains sinking slowly into the shallow water. "We need to move," Ethan said, helping her to her feet. "They'll be here soon." Stumbling along the riverbank, they found temporary shelter in a cave carved into the hillside. There, Ethan patched up Laura's wound and reviewed the stolen data. What they discovered confirmed their worst fears. The Eclipse Syndicate was planning a full-scale assault on Nova Haven, intending to seize control of its resources. Worse, still, Richard himself was en route to the colony, determined to retrieve Laura or eliminate her if necessary. "This changes everything," Ethan muttered, scrolling through the files. "If we don't act now, they'll destroy this place." Laura clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll stop them," she declared. "Whatever it takes." Together, they formulated a new plan. Using the stolen intel, they contacted Commander Hayes, revealing the Syndicate's plot and urging her to prepare defenses. At first, Hayes was skeptical, but when Ethan provided concrete evidence, she agreed to mobilize the colony's forces. As preparations unfolded, Laura took charge of organizing civilians, ensuring they were evacuated to safer zones. Her leadership surprised even herself. She'd always thought of herself as weak, incapable of standing up to anyone. Yet here she was, rallying strangers and earning their trust. The night before the expected attack, Laura stood on a ridge overlooking the colony, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Ethan joined her, his presence a steady comfort. "You've come a long way," he said softly. From the woman who stepped off that plane scared and unsure, to someone ready to protect an entire colony. "I didn't have much choice," Laura replied, though there was no bitterness in her voice. "This is my chance to start over, to prove I'm more than what Richard made me believe." Ethan smiled faintly. "And you're doing exactly that." Below them, the lights of Nova Haven twinkled like stars, a beacon of hope amidst uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring chaos and danger, but Laura knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't let fear dictate her life anymore. Whatever happened, she would face it head-on, with courage, strength, and the unwavering belief that she deserved a better future. The attack came at dawn, just as Ethan and Laura had predicted. The sky above Nova Haven lit up with streaks of red and orange as ships descended from orbit, their engines roaring like thunder. Explosions echoed across the colony, shaking the ground beneath Laura's feet. She stood near the edge of the settlement, watching as the first wave of invaders breached the perimeter defenses. Commander Hayes' voice crackled over the communicator clipped to Laura's belt. "All units, hold your positions. Protect the civilians at all costs." Laura tightened her grip on the weapon Ethan had given her, a compact plasma rifle designed for close-range combat. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was it, the moment she'd been preparing for. She couldn't afford to falter now. Ethan appeared beside her, his expression grim but determined. "Stay close," he said. "We'll push them back together." Together they moved toward the front lines, joining a group of defenders holding their ground against the advancing enemy. The Eclipse Syndicate's soldiers were heavily armed and well-trained, but so were the Accord's forces. Laser fire filled the air, lighting up the battlefield in flashes of green and blue. Laura ducked behind cover, returning fire whenever she spotted an opening. Despite the chaos, Laura felt a strange sense of clarity. Every shot she fired, every step she took, it was all part of something bigger than herself. For years, she'd lived in fear, letting Richard dictate her life. Now, she was fighting not just for her own freedom, but for the safety of everyone around her. As the battle raged on, Ethan signaled for her to follow him deeper into the fray. Their goal was to reach the central command post, where Commander Hayes was coordinating the defense effort. If they could secure that position, they might be able to turn the tide of the fight. The journey was perilous. Syndicate troops swarmed the streets, forcing Laura and Ethan to take cover frequently. At one point, they found themselves pinned down behind a crumbling wall, outnumbered and outgunned. Just when it seemed hopeless, reinforcements arrived. Colonists, who had volunteered to join the fight armed with whatever weapons they could find. "Hold this position," Ethan shouted to the newcomers before turning to Laura. "We're almost there." With renewed determination, they pressed forward, finally reaching the command post. Inside, Commander Hayes was issuing orders rapidly, her face tense but focused. When she saw Laura and Ethan enter, she nodded curtly. "Good. We need you two for the next phase." "The next phase?" Laura asked, confused. "We've located their leader," Hayes explained. "He's holed up in a bunker near the forest edge. Take him out and the rest will fall apart." Ethan exchanged a glance with Laura. Do we have backup? A small strike team is assembling outside, Hayes replied. But time is short. You'll need to move quickly. Without hesitation, Laura joined the strike team, her resolve stronger than ever. As they approached the bunker, memories of Richard flooded her mind, his cruel words, his controlling grip, the way he'd made her feel powerless. But those memories no longer held her captive. They fueled her instead, driving her forward. When they reached the bunker, Ethan led the charge, breaching the entrance with explosives. Laura followed close behind, her rifle raised. The interior was dimly lit, its corridors lined with crates and equipment. Voices echoed ahead, growing louder as they advanced. Finally, they reached the main chamber. There, standing in the center of the room, was Richard. He looked different from the last time Laura had seen him, leaner, angrier, his eyes cold and calculating. Beside him stood several armed guards, their weapons trained on the intruders. Well, well, Richard sneered, his gaze locking onto Laura. Look who decided to show up. Laura stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. It's over, Richard. Let it go. Let it go. Richard laughed bitterly. You think running away makes you free? You'll never escape me, Laura, never. For a moment, doubt flickered in her mind. Could she really face him? Could she stand up to the man who had controlled her for so long? But then she remembered everything she'd endured, the pain, the fear, the endless nights spent wondering if she'd ever break free. And she realized something important. She wasn't that same woman anymore. You don't control me anymore, she said firmly, raising her weapon. I'm done being afraid of you. Richard's smile faded, replaced by a look of pure hatred. You ungrateful little... Before he could finish, Ethan fired a shot, striking one of the guards. Chaos erupted as both sides opened fire. Laura dove for cover, returning shots instinctively. Amidst the confusion, she spotted an opportunity and took it. Aiming directly at Richard, her shot hit its mark, sending him stumbling backward. For a moment, he stared at her in disbelief, clutching his injured shoulder. Then, with a roar of rage, he lunged toward her. Laura reacted quickly, sidestepping his attack and delivering a swift kick to his knee. He collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. It's over, she repeated, standing over him. You lose. Defeated, Richard glared up at her, his pride shattered. Behind them, the remaining guards surrendered, overwhelmed by the strike team. As Ethan secured the area, Laura turned away from Richard, refusing to waste another second. On him. Outside, the tide of the battle had shifted. With their leader captured, the Eclipse Syndicate's forces began retreating, their assault crumbling under the Accord's counterattack. Cheers erupted among the defenders as news of their victory spread. Later that evening, Laura stood on a hill overlooking the colony, watching as workers began repairing the damage. The sky was clear, dotted with stars that seemed brighter than ever. Ethan joined her, his presence a comforting constant. You did it, he said quietly. You saved Nova Haven. I didn't do it alone, Laura replied, smiling faintly. We all did. Ethan nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. What happens now? For you, I mean. Laura thought about it for a moment. She'd come here by accident, fleeing a life she hated. But now, after everything she'd been through, she realized she had a choice. She could return to Earth, or she could stay, build a new life among the stars. I want to stay, she admitted. This place feels like home in a way I never expected. Ethan smiled, relief evident in his eyes. I'm glad. And if you ever need anything, someone to talk to or just a friend, you know where to find me. Laura nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Free from Richard, free from fear, and free to shape her own destiny. As they stood there together, gazing out at the glowing horizon, Laura knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. She had fought for her future, and won.